Yes, don't do that. Hey guys, we are here with our next session with Dean, Fabi, and James. They'll be doing a talk around 7 reasons DeFi is broken. Number 5 will blow your mind. And I'll let you guys take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Can everyone hear us well? Oh yeah, I see people popping up in the chat. Cool. Yeah, so this session is 7 reasons DeFi is broken. Number 5 will blow your mind. Let's see if it's actually going to be exactly 7 things we're talking about. But in general, the idea here is to give a kind of like an overall view on like a lot of the things that are broken in DeFi, not just technical stuff, but maybe dive a little bit into business models or community or culture or security processes or whatever it might be. I'm here with Dean. He's a researcher at Status and one of the co-founders of Dialectic. And James, he's one of the founders of Suma, voted best hair on Ethereum. I don't know what else is there to say about you. But you've given a talk already at this conference. So if you're interested in Bitcoin development, go back and check that out. Given that there's like a lot we can talk about, I think I'd like to start from the top, essentially what do we think is like one of the stuff that's really an underlying root cause or that can explain like some of the other things and like work our way from there. So if I were to ask you guys like what's like one of the number 1 things that's broken about DeFi, what would be your answer?
Do you want to go, James, or shall I?
Go ahead, Dean.
So one of the things which kind of stands out is the fact that when looking at DeFi products, I see everyone advertising how they're lending things on all these lending platforms and stuff, but I don't actually see anyone borrowing any of the ETH which is on the platform, which would say to me that there's actually no real user base, which begs the question of like who's on the other side and who's subsidizing all this DeFi stuff. Because if it's the VCs, then it's not really DeFi.
I know there have been a few DeFi protocols that just directly spent DeFi VC money and gave it away to users. I think like that problem is pretty ETH specific right now. Like nobody seems to want Ether in any of these DeFi protocols. If you look at the compound rate, it's like 0.5% typically, something like that.
I think the problem is, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think the problem is kind of twofold. No one wants to buy DAI to lend DAI because they might miss out on the gains that they have on ETH, but then also no one wants to borrow ETH. So it's just like,
yeah. And with DAI and the lending protocol, you're also competing with the DSR, which can be a bit of a weird thing.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, all of this is to say, like there's for sure a lack of real users, right? Like it often feels a little bit like a circle jerk where someone builds DeFi for someone else who builds DeFi, but it's not really something where you provide value to any end users. Mm-hmm. I think an interesting related topic to kind of like the lack of real users is also the lack of real business models. Which then leads to a lot of other stuff in terms of like not aligned incentives. But as far as I can tell, like the only real business model that I see people successfully pulling off is capturing value through holding governance tokens, which is pretty questionable at the very least. I'd be interested in your guys' opinion if you've seen other stuff and generally how you think about it. Might be a segue also into a bit of governance discussion there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, I've been working in tokens for close to 5 years now. No, more than 5 years now. Jesus. And everybody has always been looking for a place where tokens fit in a business model and work and make sense. And nobody has ever found one. The closest we've ever come to that is, like you said, just like the token captures value somehow. So we have all of these like token sales, all of these governance tokens, all of these utility tokens, all of the and whatnot. and they're just not really doing anything except like going around in a speculation loop over and over. And right now, like that's the use case DeFi is serving.
So two things from my end. There was an interesting talk by Sunny that kind of spoke about the whole governance token in relation to Maker on top of Ethereum, in that the relationship of the two is kind of parasitic to each other, because with Maker, the actual security that you're getting is the security of the Ethereum network, and then there's the parasitic thing in the other way, in that people are using Maker but not actually helping the Ethereum network the other way. And then, but that's like a longer thing that he talked about, so I recommend watching that. Then the other thing is, like, when it comes to business models, I think it's like one of the things with like lending platforms is collateral is at like 150%. No one's gonna borrow anything if I have to put in 150% collateral. That's insane. Like, why the hell would I do that? That's why I think the only thing which actually makes sense is like essentially flash loans for arbitrage. That is literally the only DeFi lending thing where you have a business model that's good enough. You can immediately give back to the people who have actually staked. And it's like, there's an equilibrium there. Everything else is just kind of like, yeah, it'd be fun to borrow something, but why the hell would I like put down 150 ETH to then get like 100 ETH and still have to pay back to get everything back?
I think sense to me. I think flash loans are one of the like few legitimately interesting things in DeFi. It's something that you can do on chain, but you can't do off chain. The reason that we have to put up 150% collateral in DeFi is because there's no recourse, right? If I loan you money in real life, even if you don't put down collateral, my loan to you is collateralized by my ability to drag you into court somewhere, right? Since you don't have that so much on chain with anonymous actors and ETH accounts somewhere in the world, you have to put down a lot more collateral, and loans are very capital inefficient. I will say that at equilibrium, the cost of a flash loan is probably zero or near zero. Because the risk to the lender is near zero and the time duration is basically zero.
It's like, if I have the 150%, why would I put down that collateral to then get a loan? Just use the assets which I have.
I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. I think a big part that's also like overlooked just from a pure user perspective is like there's a lot of talk around counterparty risk and how it mitigates counterparty risk, but there's very little talk about risk that it introduces that you would, in like classical centralized finance won't have. And obviously that kind of risk is really hard to, measure up against each other. But it's, am I actually going to lend something on chain if I want to buy a house? Probably not, because I don't know if this stuff just burns to the ground the next day. And especially like systematic risk. I mean, it leads us a little bit into like composability, which I would love to talk about a little bit, where it's there's so many layers of risk that get introduced by, especially if the systems get more and more complex, that it's really, really hard to even say, what am I gaining versus what am I trading off here? To come to the composability stuff, I think this meme has been going around, like money Legos versus money Django, and while I think composability in Ethereum is one of the really strong things that are there, the network effects that come out of it. But it's not stuff we've seen for the first time in software development, right? If you look at the JavaScript ecosystem or whatever, and you install a package there and it comes with 50 more dependencies, like just because you cannot look at the package.json of your DeFi project, it doesn't mean there's a similar list there. And I think there's actually a lot of risk that's being introduced that's so nebulous because it's impossible for anyone to even see, all these different things that play together, or that could potentially play together that weren't even attempted to be. Yeah. So I'd be interested in your guys' opinion on like composability. Is that still a feature, or is it really more of a bug at this point?
I'll give an anecdote on when I was still doing auditing at ZK Labs and all the DeFi things were popping up. The one thing we always used to like put in the little disclaimer at the end of the audit is like we can tell that this protocol works the way it does with these like assumptions, but because everything is so composable, you can't tell if something is safe or not. Like an attack. The whole flash loan stuff was a perfect example, right? No one in 2017 thought that something like this would actually happen, where a user could get an insane amount of assets essentially for a single block, and then it happened, and it breaks DeFi products. So I think that when it comes to dealing with other people's money, I think a lot of people in this space are probably not, because it's ETH, they're not considerate enough that it's actually other people's money. And they allowed for this whole composability, which in my opinion just shouldn't be possible. Like if you want composable, like restrain it to a very small subset of things, which you can be sure are secure as well.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, and you can look at current events for this, right? Is just a few weeks ago, there was the composability issue with IMBTC and Uniswap, right? And that led to a fairly small theft that was repeated, 10 times bigger a week later. Someone almost literally just copy-pasted the attack and stole tens of millions of dollars. And that happened because IMBTC was treated like a normal ERC20 token, but didn't behave like one. So the Uniswap market made a bad assumption about what the token was doing, and it was insecure as a result. I don't think there's any way we can prevent these. We can maybe automate detection, but given Ethereum's state model and execution environment, this is a built-in problem of the EVM.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I found interesting when thinking about the security of these systems is the argument often is well, the code we've written is secure, right? Yeah. And that's fine and that's great and that should be the case, right? But part of the threat model is not all the other people's code also bug free, but how does it behave? What is the promise towards the user, and does it behave in that way? That really should be the standard, and not, does my little system fulfill that? And I think that's often missing the point, even if you look at audit reports or how people approach generally thinking about security for their project.
Mm-hmm. Your code might be secure in your GitHub repo, but as soon as you deploy it, the security story changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Another topic I'd like to chat about is upgradable contracts, and there are multiple things you can chat about there. But I think on the highest level, you have two ways of upgrading contracts. It's one is actually in the centralized way, and the team holds some form of admin key. That's the case for most DeFi projects currently. And then you have kind of MakerDAO style, where you try to decentralize some of that functionality or permissioning around that functionality, and you actually introduce an on-chain governance system. There is somewhat of a loose middle thing where it's maybe not fully around on-chain voting in terms of coin holder voting, but you have maybe some form of DAO, and it's a permission set of people, and people know who these people are. But in the end, it's the same problem, right? And I think one thing to talk about is are these governance systems actually sophisticated enough, or are they doing what they should be doing? The other thing is just generally, if there is an admin key, what is this admin key able to do? And if you actually look at it, for a lot of these projects, it means they can drain user funds, or they can touch user funds in one way or another. And if that's true, and you're saying, we're mitigating counterparty risk and so on, didn't you just introduce that risk to a random dev team where you have no clue what their OPSEC is around this key? So yeah, anyway, there's like a whole array of stuff you can talk about, but I think generally it's a quite interesting topic. So I'd be interested in, like, do you guys think upgradable contracts are necessary? Because that's, I think, what the industry thinks right now, what most people are doing. And if so, is there even a good way of doing it?
I think that upgradability is the antithesis of trustlessness and permissionless protocols. Like, if we upgrade the Ethereum itself and Bitcoin upgrades through hard forking, and I think that if you're not doing that with the lower level protocol and saying that you're deploying everything new and on your little website you can choose which version of the protocol to pick, I think you're lying to your users and saying that it's completely permissionless and trustless by forcing them into using the newest version of your protocol.
I think, like a lot of things in security, we can look at this as assumptions, right? Is most DeFi protocols without upgradability, without governance, they're assuming that you can get a transaction on chain in a timely manner, right? And that's a good like baseline assumption. As soon as we add governance, we have to assume things like you can get a transaction on chain in a reasonable amount of time and the dev team's not malicious. If there's voting governance, you also have to assume that someone can't buy enough tokens to affect it. In practice, that those might be bad assumptions. You can look at like the recent MakerDAO stuff. There was a movement to just spend a few $100,000 to buy enough Maker to drain all of the ETH in the system. And somebody wrote a smart contract to enable pooling of MKR to do that, right? So the voting governance might not be a good assumption in practice. As far as like whether trusting the team is a good assumption, like that depends very heavily on the team. And we haven't seen as many governance exit scams as we have exchange exit scams and token sale exit scams. But that's not to say they won't happen in the future.
I think the whole trusting the team thing is completely backward, like from where this space came from. If we go to Bitcoin, which was written by some anonymous guy and everything, the fact that we add personality to all of this stuff and are like, well, you can trust this because this guy who built it has done these other projects before, is kind of, it doesn't make sense to me whatsoever. Is it really DeFi if we have all these personalities behind everything and we trust people based on their personalities? Because then it doesn't seem like a very permissionless thing, because now we're just adding reputation as the gatekeeper for our protocols.
I think like Ethereum, a huge part of its success was built on establishing this cult of personality around a small number of people on the founding team, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that gets replicated over and over with these Ethereum and DeFi projects. Basically, every chain and every DeFi project that's big has 1 to 3 driving personalities behind it. There are very few exceptions to that rule. Bitcoin, of course, being the notable one.
Yeah, I think one thing that I find a little bit frustrating with this is like just the fact of like naming it DeFi, right? It's like this implication of it's either decentralized or not. It's like either there's this legacy system and there's this great new thing that's decentralized, and it almost like assumes it's a binary thing, like you're decentralized or you're not decentralized, right? And I feel like a lot of it in the space is at least at the beginning was approached like that. It's like, yes, we're DeFi because we're decentralized, and there's very little talk about what's really centralized here, what's not decentralized, and so on. And that now if you talk to teams that still hold these admin keys, every one of these teams will tell you, well, but we have plans to do all of this great stuff, right? We will roll out this kind of governance system. And I think a lot of that stuff would sound more believable if I would have seen one thing in the wild where it'd say like, yep, that's actually a governance system, go for that. That will actually be a solid decentralized solution. But that just hasn't been there yet. And I think, there's a lot, it goes a little bit more in the direction of like how things were communicated and DeFi as a meme almost. But I think there's just also a lot of, lying or not being quite honest about how things look like.
Having been in that position in the past, you start off with like all of these ideals of what you want to build, and you make a series of compromises along the way. And you tell people about your future plans to build this great decentralized system and why you're building the centralized alternative in the meantime. And then you just kind of get stuck doing that forever. So it may not be like that people go into this with bad intentions. It's very, very easy to get stuck building the centralized thing and to keep doing that and to keep improving it. And there are very, very few teams who have made the transition to a decentralized like development team or a decentralized community in any meaningful way after building something centralized.
Which team do you think has done that? Because I couldn't even count one on my finger right now.
Let's see. That's a really interesting question. I think Ethereum is in the process of doing that fairly well. Is they started off with like, a very small number of people doing the technical work, and there are many more contributors now. I'll keep like pointing to Bitcoin forever, but they're by far the most progressed along this path. But even like Ethereum, you're starting to see a narrowing of the field a little bit as like client diversity shifts happen. I don't know. It's a very like difficult thing to do, to like give up the project that you've worked on for so long.
Yeah, I feel like a contributing factor to that is also that no software is ever done already. Right, so there's, even if you ship version 1, of course, you've already dreamed up version 5 of it, and it's that's also one reason why we're stuck in these like endless 0.1, 0.2 releases and beta releases, and nothing ever seems really production ready. And of course, while that's the
Web 3.1 beta 57.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that's nothing. I mean, it seems to be like quite a bit in this space like this, but it's generally a thing in software development. I think, nothing's ever ready, and but now it's suddenly bound to governance and decentralizing a system, and that's where it gets problematic at some point.
Right. You promised people that you would ship it and it would be done at some point, and you would step back, but software is never ready.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears a little bit, like a slightly different topic, which is DeFi as a meme, right? Because I feel like Ethereum in particular, but generally blockchain, goes through these like phases of memes or things that people are talking about that will be solved and that bring in new users. And obviously DeFi is one of them right now. It's probably the biggest one. Do you think it's generally a good meme to describe what the intention is, or not?
No. It's what is like, because all I see is people like tweet, or I don't anymore because I muted the term DeFi because it started annoying me. But the only thing you used to see is people tweeting about DeFi and then never actually explaining what it is.
Well, DeFi is a marketing term, and it's supposed to appeal. It appeals to a certain group of people, and it's probably like fairly effective in that group. I think like it's interesting to talk about what speaks to people about the meme. A lot of the reason I got into crypto in the first place was to have some degree of control over my own finances, right? So I think that's something a lot of people want out of DeFi. Participation is a big deal in DeFi, like going out and using these things, managing your own stuff. That's one of the reasons why I run like a bunch of full nodes at home, is just to be able to participate in the network.
Yeah. Like I said, I think DeFi, as similar to, I don't know, digital gold or whatever, like it's actually for a marketing term to bring in people and to be like, you understand with 3 words. You're supposed to understand with 3 words what this is all about. It's not the worst term, but I think it's the way it's used, right? It's like, this is DeFi, that's DeFi, and it's really misused as a marketing term to pump projects. I think that's where it falls apart for me. But generally, as like a thing to like just be like, this generally goes in the direction of what people are trying to achieve here. It's maybe not even the worst term.
Yeah. I question how many people it's actually brought in, though, right? Because I feel like the whole DeFi thing is, as you previously stated, the circle jerk of the same 5 dudes on Twitter who are writing DeFi newsletters, and it's perpetually them, and they're subscribed to each other's newsletters, and that's about it. How many people have like come up to you at a conference and been like, I got into this space because I saw a DeFi newsletter?
Well, I'm gonna guess that number is very, very low. DeFi is a term for marketing within the space, right? It's not a term for going out to people who have never heard of crypto.
Yeah.
It's not like growing the user base of Ethereum.
So it's great for marketing.
It's great for competing against other DeFi projects.
We're more DeFi than the other DeFiers.
Pretty much, yeah. What's really interesting to me is like how much of a how much of an in-group there is. Like you said, there's 5 guys on Twitter writing newsletters. But there's also people out there gating what is and isn't DeFi, right? So it's really like interesting to see people out there on Twitter being emotionally invested in the DeFi meme enough to tell other people that they're not good enough to be part of it.
Yeah, which is it's quite interesting to me that the tribalism actually emerged around DeFi, because with a lot of the like layer 1 protocols, you can kind of understand it. People just hold bags and that's their incentive. And I guess you can hold bags in like the DeFi projects, but it's not like DeFi is yours, right? Like, where does the emotional investment come from having to dogfight on Twitter around DeFi? I don't quite, it's something that's really hard for me to wrap my head around.
Yep.
But yeah, it's real.
Yeah, crypto has always been very tribal driven. A lot of like the community came out of a very us versus society attitude, and I think that kind of propagated.
Yeah.
Dean, I'd be interested as someone who has audited or has worked as an auditor in the space. Are you following the like a little bit the security around DeFi and like audits that are happening there? And I think like more recently, like the Trail of Bit stuff that happened.
I'm still in there's ETH security channels for all these things. So I still, every 3 days, whenever some new DeFi protocol gets hacked, I see the fact that it's like 150 new message notifications. I haven't really followed that far, because to me it seems like it's always like the same attack. It always seems like it's the exact same thing. And I think the perfect example for this is like, we still get reentrancy bugs. And that was the thing which took down the DAO, when you think people like know how to not have reentrancy bugs in their code at this point, but we still do. So I like follow a bit every now and then, but not as much as I used to when I was still in security.
Yeah. Hey guys, we're out of time actually. Thanks so much for the really great discussion. We're going to transition to the next talk now.
Great.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.